America is back.
And so is Donald Trump. And like last time, he's ushered in chaos, confusion, and controversy.
I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you.
I wish you did.
The news cycle is moving at dizzying speed as Trump enacts mass deportations, a regressive economic agenda, and an unpredictable foreign policy. My guest tonight is a former Republican congressman who was both budget director and chief of staff to President Trump during his first term. The one-time White House insider has a unique understanding of Republican politics, and especially Trump and how he operates. I'm Mehdi Hasan, and tonight I'll be going head-to-head with Mick Mulvaney in London's historic Conway Hall. I'll challenge him on President Trump's immigration policies, whether Trump is mentally stable, and why he still supports the president after once vowing to never vote for him again. Tonight, I'll also be joined by a panel of experts. George Conway, a lawyer, former Republican and co-founder of the Lincoln Project, Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University, and Greg Swenson, Chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Mick Mulvaney, thank you for joining me on Head to Head tonight here in London.
Mehdi, I'm looking forward to it.
So let's start with your own journey on Donald Trump, who you know well. I think it's fair to say you've been on quite a flip-flopping journey when it comes to President Trump. You once called him a terrible human being, then you became his White House chief of staff.
Yes.
Then after January 6th, you resigned from the government and you said you wouldn't vote for him again. Then you did vote for him again last year. A man you know incited an insurrection against the US government. Why?
Fair enough. By the way, I'm not the only person to have varying opinions on Donald Trump. In fact, I think his vice president currently has said some interesting things about him. The part about the horrible person, I remember very vividly because he would remind me of it on a regular basis. I was running for Congress at the time, and I had a debate that evening that the Access Hollywood tape came out.
Yes.
This is the one where he said you grab women by the privates and so forth. I gave a candid answer to it. And he never let me forget it. By the way, the man's capacity for forgiveness is infinite. His capacity for forgetfulness is absolutely non-existent. I can tell you this, is I worked with him for 3 years. I never saw any misogyny. I never saw any racial disparity, racism. I never saw the things that people accuse him of doing.
We'll come back to that.
Is he a perfect guy? No.
But you said you wouldn't vote for him again because of the insurrection.
Yeah, well, I didn't vote for him in the Republican primary. And a lot of folks did.
But you chose to put a man back in the Oval Office who you said, let me just quote you.
Yeah.
You said that he lit the fuse for the insurrection and attempted coup in 2021. You said we needed a president that day. We didn't have one.
Yeah, and listen, I think Bill Barr said something very similar. Bill actually testified against him at the January 6th committee and said, look, general elections are binary choices in my country. They really are. We don't have a third party. It's this or that. Yeah. And you have to say, okay, do I take this person with all of their warts and all their difficulties or this person?
I mean, an insurrection against the US government is not a wart. It should be disqualifying, should it not?
I quit over it. I quit over for a different reason.
You also said, I do not think you can be a reasonable person and say that Donald Trump should be president again.
Yeah, I think
so you're not a reasonable person.
Look, American politics is a nasty business.
Are you saying basically you're happy to shift your views because that's how politics works? Or are you saying you get the man wrong? Because you also, I just got to remind people here before we move on, just before the 2020 election, you wrote in a Wall Street Journal op-ed that, quote, if he loses, Trump will concede gracefully. He'll fight hard to make sure the results are fair, and in the end, he'll accept the result, whatever it is. How did that work out?
That's the easiest question I'll get tonight, because people misunderstand this. That was not a prediction. That was advice.
It was a prediction.
It absolutely was not, and here's why. I know how Donald Trump works. By this time, after the election, I had been shut out and wasn't able to talk to the folks on the team. I believe that the RNC was lying to people like myself who were trying to encourage a discussion about the election and so forth. People stopped taking my phone calls, and I knew how Donald Trump takes information. And one of the things he reads religiously is the op-ed pages of the Wall Street Journal. I wrote that piece for an audience of one.
So you didn't believe he was going to hand over power? You said you didn't just write an op-ed. You went on CNBC and said, I recommend that he accept a peaceful transition of power, which I think he would do absolutely. That sounds like a prediction, which was wrong.
I was, again, advising the gentleman, and he did not take my advice.
He hasn't taken your advice on a lot of major issues. I think you were one of those people, including his vice president, his attorney general, who said, don't pardon the violent criminals from January the 6th.
I thought that was a
He came
mistake.
in and pardoned nearly 1,600 people, many of whom attacked police officers, many of whom were prosecuted for having deadly weapons, many of whom had other convictions or pending charges for manslaughter, drug trafficking, rape, sexual assault of minors. Trump pardoned them all against the advice of his own people. What kind of person does that?
I thought it was a bad decision. I don't know why he did it. If you're not in the room with him when he's making the decisions, it's hard to understand exactly why he's doing it. By the way, his vice president said the same thing. Right? A week beforehand.
So he threw them all under the bus and just did this thing.
And he should have pardoned
and then you all just fell in line. The party always falls in line, no matter what he does.
He is the leader of the party. There's no question about that.
So just blind support from the Republicans.
Blind support. No,
I mean, this is a pretty big issue.
You can criticize, you can disagree, and then still support.
Well, nobody resigned over this. I mean, you're not in the administration, but none of these people resigned. It's a pretty big deal, right? To pardon insurrectionists who assaulted police officers.
I don't think it's the worst decision he's made. I think the worst decision he made was to take security away from various members of his first administration, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton. And I don't like John Bolton very much, but I thought there have been some
It's a horrible thing to do.
decisions.
He's a vindictive man. You say he's forgiving. He forgives the insurrectionists, but goes after his critics.
I think he's done a fine job as president. There's a lot of decisions.
But hold on, how can he have done a fine job as president?
Right now.
Well, he did. January 20th was his presidency. He began his presidency by pardoning insurrectionists. How do you just ignore that, is what I'm wondering.
You don't ignore it.
You literally are. You're saying he's done a fine job. By definition, you're ignoring.
You have to take all of the. I don't think anybody who's president does 100% of the stuff that anybody wants, other than the president.
But there have to be some red lines. There are no red lines for
you have
Donald
to take a look at the totality of the circumstances, don't you? I mean, aren't there politicians you like that you haven't agreed with 100% of the time?
Yes, I think for a lot of people, for example, voting for Joe Biden on the Democratic side, he supported what happened in Gaza. That was a red line. But for Republicans with Trump, there never seems to be a red line. Whatever he does, all is forgiven. You have called Trump's critics deranged for saying Trump would behave in an authoritarian, even fascistic way, that he would use the government in his second term to go after his critics. And yet, since he's taken office, Trump has cracked down on the press. He's ignored multiple court rulings. He's deported American citizens. He's threatened a Democratic New York Muslim mayoral candidate with deportation. He's arrested a Democratic mayor and a liberal judge. He's indicted a Democratic Congresswoman. Unlike your predictions about Trump, the predictions of his critics have been vindicated.
Let's pick one.
I mean, they've been vindicated.
Let's just pick one.
Go.
Let's pick the indicting the Democrat Congresswoman. Just because you're in Congress doesn't mean you get a get-out-of-jail-free card for whatever you do. They indicted her for attacking or assaulting a federal officer. Just because you're in Congress doesn't mean you can get away with that kind of stuff.
He didn't just indict her. Alina Habba, his ridiculous U.S. attorney in New Jersey, also arrested Ras Baraka, the mayor of Newark. He then had to be released, and a judge said that was a ridiculously hasty arrest. You are targeting political opponents.
Adam Schiff is a Democrat senator, used to be in the House, was a leading critic of Trump. Trump tweeted something today about, oh my goodness, it looks like Adam Schiff may have committed mortgage fraud over the course of the last couple of years. The point is, it's mortgage fraud, or at least it's an allegation of mortgage fraud. And my point is this, is it? It's just because you're a senator and a Democrat senator and an opponent of Donald Trump, does that mean that you're sort of protected against any sort of...
No, of course not.
Okay.
The totality.
The totality.
So for example,
we can do that with everything on the list.
Okay, the New York mayoral candidate, Zohran Mamdani.
Yeah.
He says he may be here illegally. We may have to look at deporting him. That's insane.
Is he?
No, he's an American citizen.
How did he get here?
So are we going to question every American citizen now? You think that's normal? I'm an American citizen. You're going to question my citizenship as well. If I say
are you above the law? I don't understand. What's the equal application
Hold on.
law?
I just want to clarify where we stand here. You're saying it's okay for Donald Trump to cast aspersions on every American citizen who he doesn't like and suggest that they're illegally here.
Is casting aspersions fascism?
You don't think threatening a mayoral candidate...
How did he threaten him?
He said, we're going to have to look at that, whether he's here illegally.
Is that a threat, or is that just...
Hold on.
But look,
do you think that's normal?
Where was this defense, Mehdi? Where was this defense when Donald Trump was charged criminally for paying back a loan early at his business?
That's your description. That's your description.
My description is
of what multiple grand juries and prosecutors disagree with you on.
Is no more one-sided than your list.
But what's interesting is during that period, we were told that the Democrats were weaponizing government against Trump. And I'm saying to you, that was projection. That is exactly what Trump is doing now. He is tasking the government to go after his opponents. That is what I'm saying.
I had Democrat friends of mine reach out to me and say, the thing about charging Trump criminally for financial stuff in his business, that stuff worried them the most because it was setting a precedent that they were worried would come back and be used against them, which is exactly what appears to be happening with Mr. Schiff.
So you're admitting it's revenge?
What is the difference between revenge and applying the same standard to others that have been applied to you?
It's not the same standard because Donald Trump wrapped up all the other trials against him. We'll never see the trial for January 6th, which even you objected to.
You charge a man.
Multiple trials were shut down.
Put somebody in jail for saying something wrong on a loan application. In jail. By the way, no one's ever gone to jail in my country.
Hold on.
Mick,
you know very well the other charges, which he'll never see a courtroom for, were much more serious. You know this. Even Bill Barr said he could be prosecuted for what he did with national security documents in Florida. But let me ask you a broader question, since we're not going to agree on this.
Right.
We are living in a country, you and I wonder whether we'll agree here, in which masked ICE agents with no badges, no ID numbers, no uniforms, can just grab people off the street, including American citizens, and just disappear them. If we saw this in a foreign country, wouldn't we call it authoritarianism?
Yeah, I don't like this one. There's a bunch of Republicans who have talked about this, that generally speaking, we like to perceive law enforcement as a force for good in the country. And I don't like this idea of having law enforcement cover their faces. If you knocked on my door in the middle of the night with a mask on, I'm probably going to shoot you. And we don't want to be that place.
But we are that place now. It's expanding. Multiple police forces are borrowing. If you live in a country where masked goons, armed goons from the federal government can grab people off the street. I'll take back the goon.
There you go.
Masked agents from ICE.
Yeah.
Violently, we've all seen the videos, it's all on tape, violently grabbing people off the street, gardeners, dishwashers, hairdressers, American citizens, kids, elementary school children. That is not fascistic authoritarianism. That doesn't concern you.
The part that I don't like is the mask part. The rest of the stuff I'm okay with.
You're okay with disappearing American citizens?
I have no difficulty with enforcing the law.
George Retters is a 25-year-old security guard in California, a disabled Army veteran.
Yeah.
He was taken by ICE last week. He's a U.S. citizen.
That would be wrong. Okay. I happen to think that they also deported, or at least they detained the father of 3 U.S. Marines.
They violently assaulted him on camera.
I thought that was wrong as well. Look, being a conservative with a small c, I want to believe in the institutions. I want to believe that things can move up through the courts. And I want to believe that the President of the United States, at the end of the day, will accept the court decisions.
You're telling me that you're okay right now with this alligator Alcatraz in Florida where there are 35 people to a cage, they're sleeping on the floors, there's maggots in their sandwiches, they're not getting showers or food. You're okay with that, torturing these people, many of whom have no criminal records, by the way, Mick, none whatsoever. They are law-abiding American residents.
I'm not okay with torture. If you let me answer this one, I'm not okay with torture. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is not a reliable source for me.
That's not my reliable source.
That's what I've seen.
That's not my reliable source. My reliable source is the Associated Press, who interviewed detainees, families of detainees, and lawyers.
By the way, at times, I don't trust the Associated Press. You asked me about folks who I thought were deranged when it comes to Trump. Listen, there's a lot of folks in my country who believe that when it comes to Donald Trump, the ends justify the means. Anything against him is okay.
The Associated Press is not against Donald Trump. They're reporting on what detainees have told them about the conditions. El Salvador, the CICOT, don't even get me started on the conditions there, where Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the man who was brought back, he says he was kept on his knees all night long, couldn't sit down. That's torture.
I have seen the press lie about Donald Trump firsthand.
He was tortured, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, thanks to Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and this administration. Do you support that?
I do not support torture. I do not know that happened.
But that's the allegation.
It was reported by, it was reported by folks.
The detainee said it in court documents, and this is a guy who says this is what happened to me. Multiple detainees, they're not all lying about the conditions in these places. Collective conspiracy from everyone in detention. Okay, that's a convenient get out. We mentioned Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He was the man sent illegally to El Salvador by the Trump administration. They tried to justify his deportation by saying he was an MS-13 gang leader. Trump put out a picture, he held up a picture of his knuckles showing MS-13 were photoshopped onto his hand. Terry Moran of ABC News then did an interview with Donald Trump. Remarkable moment, one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in my life as a TV journalist. Trump held up this picture.
And the picture was doctored.
The picture's doctored, right? Yeah. Trump insisted this was real. He insisted 7 times it was real. You were his chief of staff. How do you deal with that insanity?
It's not. I don't consider it to be insanity.
Here's what you consider it to be.
Here's what I consider to be bad staff work. Absolutely. Someone brought that picture into the President of the United States and said, Mr. President, here's the information. Part of my job, by the way.
Joking?
No, absolutely. Let's talk seriously about what the role of chief of staff is. Is to make sure that the information that gets to the President of the United States is good information. Because there's a lot of crap information out there. And you cannot let that stuff get into the President of the United States. Someone gave him this and said, Mr. President, look at this guy's knuckles. But a good staff work would prevent that type of information from getting in front of the President of the States.
So I agree with you. A good staffer would prevent this from getting to him. They wouldn't have doctored the photo to begin with. Let's not even get into the dishonesty of this administration. But a sane human being would look at that and say, don't be silly, that's not a real picture. A 4-year-old child could tell you that that is a Photoshopped image. The reporter tried to tell him it was a Photoshopped image. He shouted at the reporter. He insisted 7 times that this was not Photoshopped.
If the head of the Department of National Intelligence brought me that photograph and said, this is a picture of the guy, who am I to, I would probably believe that.
And after humiliating himself on national TV, would you not fire that person for giving you fake information? The White House just doubled down on the lie, which is what the White House does.
If I found out the information was false, there would be repercussions, yes.
If you were chief of staff at that moment?
I don't like bad information getting in front of the
But the current chief of staff doubled down on this. They've never apologized for this lie. He told on national television 7 times.
A difference of opinion in how to handle the White House.
But it was a lie he told 7 times.
Based upon what you're showing me, I believe that to be the case. I've never seen the man's knuckles, but yeah.
Hold on. Everyone here heard you say about 90 seconds ago, it's a doctored image. You and I agreed it was a doctored image.
It does look to me like it's doctored.
It is a doctored image. Everyone knows it's a doctored image, except Donald Trump. See, I'm the guy who normally calls Trump a liar, so he lies a lot. It's worse than lying. I think he actually believed this, which makes me worry about his mental health.
We can talk about his mental health if you want.
We will shortly, but I just want to deal with should heads roll for this?
I can't defend that, and there would certainly be conversations in my White House over how to handle that.
I'm glad you're not defending it, but you've defended a lot of other stuff. So let's bring in our patient panel of experts. Let me begin with George Conway, lawyer, co-founder of the anti-Trump Lincoln Project. George, you were a lifelong Republican. You're now a very well-known, outspoken critic, I think it's fair to say, of the president. Mick thinks it's unfair to talk about fascism, authoritarianism. He didn't accept any of the examples I gave. Why do you think Trump is an authoritarian?
Because of the very things that Mick wrote about in 2020. He thought it was possible that Donald Trump would ignore the results of the 2020 election. That's a fascist. That's authoritarian. He's also a pathological liar because he continued after people told him, people who came into the White House and told him, you lost. And he didn't want to believe them. He brought in other people. No staff person could prevent him from doing that. He wanted somebody to justify his lies. He is a pathological liar with no moral conscience, no decency, no honor. And that is the problem. And all of those people end up being fascists. You were right after January 6th, and I think it's a disgrace that you now sit here and try to defend him when basically he's done nothing but get worse.
I know the information he was getting at the time. And if you were in the White House and every single person who walked in and said, you won, you won, you won, you won, what would you believe?
The evidence was to the contrary. They didn't say he won. His own lawyers told him he won. The Justice Department people told him they would resign if they tried to make him.
As George points out, the DOJ were telling him he lost. Bill Barr was telling him he lost. The guy's telling me he won was the MyPillow guy. Maybe he shouldn't have been inviting the MyPillow guy into the White House.
And
maybe that's disqualifying.
I don't like the fact that MyPillow guy was a senior advisor to the president.
Whose fault was that? Whose fault was that?
Donald Trump is ultimately responsible for his advisors. There's no question.
So why give him a pass then?
Because I understand how the presidency works. It's one of the most isolated.
There's never been a president like this. You know this.
That's fine, but that doesn't mean it's fascist. All presidents are different. Yes, he is his own thing, and I get that.
Isn't the problem, though, Mick, twice now tonight you've said he got bad information on the photo, he got bad information on the election. Maybe the president of the United States should be someone who's smart enough to reject bad information.
Again, in fact, it's an easy rhetorical point. It doesn't make you.
Leaders should be smart.
It doesn't make you a fascist authoritarian if you don't do what you've just said.
Put that to one side.
Face it.
You accept that leaders should be smart and not dumb.
Yes,
a basic criteria.
I would prefer people to be smart and not dumb.
And yet tonight you've told the audience that Donald Trump was dumb on 2 occasions. He listened to a MyPillow guy and he listened to an unnamed aide who gave him a clearly doctored image.
My difficulty with the Trump decision-making was allowing those people to be advisors to the president in the first place.
Let me bring in Greg. Greg Swenson, do you believe that Donald Trump won the 2020 election?
I'm really not sure, but I think what's important here is one of the reasons he won in 2024 is because of the pressure from the press, pressure from critics, not only calling the fascist and a racist, but also they start accusing you. How could you vote for a guy who's a misogynist, even though he's not? It's one of the reasons he won. is the people, got a little bit offended by this sort of judgment and this virtue signaling from his critics when he's done a lot of things really well. No one's perfect, but he's doing so much good for the people that voted for him, especially the working class people in America.
I apologize, Greg, I didn't introduce you to the audience. Greg is the chairman of Republicans Overseas UK, which is why I asked you about Trump and the election. Christina Greer is here, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University, been waiting very patiently. Christina, is this just about liberals being upset about the way Trump speaks, or is it something more than that in your view?
I find that the defenders of Trump like to sort of talk about semantics and sort of get tied up in words. What we are looking at is public servants. You have served this country diligently. We know your CV. But you know better, yet you refuse to do better. I think that's the piece that is so frustrating with liberals or people on the left, where you were in Congress, you understand the separation of powers, you understand checks and balances, and what you're looking at right now in Trump 2.0, where he's steamrolling Congress, where he's ignoring the courts, where he's absolutely no respect for the Constitution, and in the litany of things that you listed, George, the one thing that you forgot was shame. We are dealing with a man who has zero shame. And what's even worse is that we're looking at people who were serving in Congress, who were Republicans, who actually know that this man is actually eroding our constitutional rights. And he's only able to do it because there are good-meaning Republicans who've just forgotten that they are here to serve the American people and not writing op-eds for one man and not serving one man.
I get the part that you don't like the fact that he has any shame. I get that. Is he the ideal person for president of the United States? No, but I'm okay with him being the president. I'm especially okay with him being the president over the other choice, because that's what we had. We had a binary choice. You don't get a chance to sit back. It's one of the reasons I was critical of him in the Republican primary. Primaries are when we get a chance to go and say, you know what? I get to vote for the very best person I want. In a general, it's a binary choice.
Can I just ask, what did Kamala Harris do? You obviously disagree with her politically. She's a Democrat, you're a Republican. Yeah. But what did she do that was worse than lighting the fuse of an insurrection?
Listen, it was the... I put it to you this way. You were worried, we all should be worried about a deterioration in democracy. There's no question about that. I happen to feel that the policies that she represented would be just as deteriorating. By the way, why did Donald Trump do so well in 2024? Because he got a message. He was struggling going into the primaries. Ron DeSantis, if you remember, was doing very well. And then he got charged in New York with this criminal charge for this financial thing. And it gave him this message. Look what they're doing to me. I'm rich, I'm famous, I'm white. If they can do it to me, imagine what they can do to you. That's a very powerful message, because that is what the Democrats were doing. My point. You didn't answer my question. I am answering your question, which is that a lot of us sat back.
Charging Donald Trump for crimes that he clearly committed is worse than an insurrection. So, I mean, I'm quoting Bill Barr. Bill Barr said he committed a crime in Florida.
My point is, if you're worried about the long-term health of the democracy, you could look very critically at Kamala Harris.
Okay, let me ask you this. Last year, you said the Jeffrey Epstein scandal would have no political impact at all on Trump's election chances. And you were right about that. It didn't. But it's certainly impacting his presidency. It's probably the biggest story in America right now. It's divided the MAGA base. Many conservatives are furious with him and his administration. Trump, of course, is a former close friend of Epstein's. They're furious at him for not releasing the Epstein files, as he promised he would. Is it because, as Elon Musk has said, Donald Trump is in the Epstein files?
No, absolutely not. He's in the files. A lot of people in the files. This is if there was something in the files that was particularly damning about Donald Trump, the files would have been released by the Biden administration.
No, not if it was damning about Bill Clinton as well. Not if it was damning about...
Can I please just... Okay. If it was really damning about Donald Trump, they would have released at least that part. My guess is, and it's an educated guess, is that it's particularly damning of very important people on both sides of the political aisle, which is why Trump doesn't want to release it and why Biden didn't release it either. If it was just about Trump, it would have come out.
You were the chief of staff when Epstein apparently died by suicide in prison. You were? Yeah, we checked. So. Trump at the time baselessly suggested that Bill Clinton might have killed him, as he does.
Baselessly? Okay.
You think Bill Clinton might have killed him? Okay, just checking. I don't know how.
Is Bill Clinton on the list?
I mean, you were chief of staff at the time. You didn't come out and correct him, so maybe you do share that insane view.
Not my job.
That literally is your job as chief of staff.
No.
You just said earlier, the chief of staff controls information coming to Donald Trump. Who told him that Bill Clinton killed him?
It's not the job of the chief of staff to correct the president of the United States. And as between who knows the job of the chief of staff, you know a lot about a lot. You don't know a lot about.
But you just told me the definition was to protect Donald Trump.
front. So you failed.
The job of the President of the United States is to make sure he gets good information.
And he failed because someone told him that Bill Clinton killed Jeffrey Epstein, and you didn't protect him from that.
Did they tell him?
Yeah, he retweeted a post saying that Bill Clinton could have killed him.
So again,
I mean, right. You told me that was a job description. Last thing on Epstein. You were the chief of staff. Yeah. Trump does make this claim in 2019. The DOJ now says, the Trump DOJ, it was definitely a suicide, no cover-up, there's no files, and yet they've released a tape from prison, which is missing a minute of footage, and which it now turns out seems to have been edited. You were the chief of staff. Yeah. Did you see the full footage at the time? Is this the full unedited footage from the prison cell that night? I
have no idea, and I never saw the original film, but I did read about it.
What did you see?
I didn't see anything.
So for 6 months after his death, you're chief of staff, you don't see anything about Epstein?
No.
You don't think that's strange?
No, I don't think it was strange at all.
Why?
Because it's not the type of thing that rises up to the level of the President of the United States on an ordinary basis. It's not. No, I
mean, it literally is right now.
It is. That's dealing with the disclosure of the files, which are in the control of federal government. No, it would not have been the type of thing that we all sit around in the Situation Room and look at the video of.
But you didn't.
Of the Epstein thing. And by the way, the minute, I was reading about the minute gap, you may have read the same thing, is that apparently the video resets every single night.
Every night, apparently.
At midnight, so
but there's a trust deficit right now with this administration. But I got to ask again, you're saying you didn't see any of the video stuff, you weren't involved, this doesn't rise to the level of chief of staff or the White House, and yet you're confidently saying that Elon Musk is wrong and his name's not in the files. How do you know?
No, I didn't. No, I absolutely didn't. In fact, I think if you go back and look at the tape, I said, I imagine that Donald Trump's name is in the file someplace. There's photographs of them together. Okay. So if there's a file someplace, which I assume there is.
Trump says his name is not in anything. So he's lying.
I could imagine. Why? There'd be photographs of him.
But he said it's not him.
I have no idea. I have to imagine his name is on the list someplace. He was a member at Mar-a-Lago. By the way, Trump kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago for being too weird. True story.
I mean, he also said he's a terrific guy who likes younger women. So. Mick Mulvaney, thank you for being here. We've got more to go. We're going to talk to our very patient audience here at London's Conway Hall. We're going to go back to our panel of experts. We've got much more to talk to Mick Mulvaney, former White House Chief of Staff to Donald Trump, after a very short break. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Head to Head on Al Jazeera English. I'm joined today by former acting White House Chief of Staff for Donald Trump, Mick Mulvaney. Mick, we've been talking about Trump's style of government since coming back into office, how authoritarian he is. We did touch on his mindset, and you've advertised yourself online. We checked your speaker bureau. Oh, wow. You say one of your skills is explaining how Trump thinks, how he works, and how he processes information. Yeah. It's hard to believe that anyone, including Trump himself, knows how he thinks. But let's put your explaining skills to the test. Right. When Trump posts in May, has anyone noticed that since I said I hate Taylor Swift, she's no longer hot? What was he thinking?
May I see it? And I'm looking for the timestamp on this, because the general rule of thumb is if it's between 11 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock at night, it's him at work with the team. This is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which means this was run by a group of people. If you get a tweet from him at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's him by himself. What's he thinking there? I have no idea. There was a conversation for some reason in the Oval Office about Taylor Swift's impact.
And that set something off.
And that set something off.
When he says, shares to his 10 million followers on Truth Social, he shared a post earlier this year saying, there is no Joe Biden. He was executed in 2020. He was replaced by a cloned double. What's he thinking there, Mick?
I have no idea what he's thinking there.
Does he think that Joe Biden is a clone?
No, I don't think so.
Why share that?
Keep in mind, a good bit of what he does is trolling the left. Let's take something serious, more serious than a Biden clone. The running again in 2028. He was talking about it for a long time. Maybe I will, maybe I won't.
You don't think he's serious at all?
I don't think he's going to run again. I do think some people will talk about him running again because it suits their agendas.
But he hasn't shot it down, which is, again, why people worry about authoritarianism.
On a Sunday program one time, he said, I'm not running again. And I believe that.
And on another show, he said, I'm not joking, I'm seriously considering it. I mean, this is Trump.
But a lot of that, he does like to troll the left. There's no question about that.
This is more than just trolling. Two chiefs of staff under Trump 1 bought books about mental illness to help them understand and deal with Donald Trump. One was John Kelly, the other was Mick Mulvaney.
Yeah. It's a fascinating story about how every president is different. The book was about Roosevelt, Kennedy, and to a certain extent, I used that to try and teach the people in the White House.
Napoleon and Hitler were also chapters.
Yeah, I don't remember those, because again, they weren't presidents of the United States. And if you talk to other chiefs of staff, one of the things that we all share, every president is different from each other. Donald Trump is probably more similar to Bill Clinton than anything else. And Barack Obama is probably more similar to President Nixon. That's the personality that we're talking about. I do not think he's mentally ill.
John Kelly, who was your predecessor as chief of staff, you mentioned other... He bought a book called The Dangerous Case of Donald Trump, written by a bunch of psychiatrists, to try and understand the president's psychosis. He took it back to the White House, which he called Crazy Town.
So I do not believe, nor did I believe at that time, that Donald Trump was mentally ill. I was very clear in the book. I said, look, I'm talking about different conditions, not mental illness. John Kelly hated the president. Listen, I used to have a lot of respect for John Kelly, but you can't sit in the Oval Office and curse under your breath about what a horrible person you're working for. If that's the case, then you need to leave. And John Kelly just really, really, really despises Donald Trump. And
but not based on the crazy stuff Trump's done?
No, I think
Trump never does anything? He's just no agency?
The Donald Trump that John Kelly saw and the Donald Trump that I saw were the same Donald Trump.
Yes.
The difference is that I came up through the political wing of the party. I understand politics a little bit. John Kelly was a 40-year Marine. And if you are a military man or woman and you spend 40 years in the Marines, Donald Trump is going to make no sense to you.
It's not a military thing. Most people struggle with the nonsense he says. He says a lot of... I just want to be serious. If you walked out of Conway Hall tonight, you walked down and got on the London Underground, and somebody got onto that carriage, and they started ranting and raving about immigrants eating cats and dogs, Hannibal Lecter, Frank Sinatra, shower pressure, toilet flushes, windmills, shark attacks, you would get up and move to another seat. You would not make him your president. You would not give him the nuclear codes. You know that, and I know that.
When I took that book that you mentioned about mental illness, and I took that book and I read a passage to the men and women. We had a morale problem in the West Wing when John Kelly left, and I took the entire senior team up to Camp David for the weekend, and I read them a passage from the book, okay, about an interaction with the President of the United States, and it's very similar to what you just talked about, all over the place, this and this. And I said, now, what do you think about this? And somebody said, has that book come out yet? I didn't think that had been written. I'm like, that is a passage about FDR. Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt did not give speeches ranting about whether it's better to be killed by a shark or be electrocuted.
He didn't.
Donald Trump has.
So
you don't think Donald Trump says crazy stuff, even the examples I gave?
Listen, is it unusual? Yeah. Do I think it disqualifies you from office? No. And again,
all right, what about someone in between?
Apparently he's not the first person to be like that in office.
It's not someone we've ever seen.
That's because you never saw FDR. Go read the passage.
No one who worked with FDR wrote books about how crazy he was. They didn't.
Go read it.
When you were chief of staff, Trump tweeted that Democratic Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Ayanna Pressley should go back and fix the crime-infested places from which they came. How is that not an inherently racist statement to tell a bunch of non-white American women, 3 of whom were born in the US, to go back to where they came from? And did you not call him out at the time, either privately, publicly, as his chief of staff?
I'll tell you a story. When Charlottesville happened, I was in the Office of Management and Budget, and I had many number of people threatened to quit. I was doing a Sunday talk show someplace. I was in Maine, and we had to do it remote. And Charlottesville had just come out. This is where he was allegedly said there was good people on both sides. I'm walking out by myself, and a very imposing-looking African-American man followed me down the hallway by myself. And I'm like, what is going to happen? He's like, hey, Mulvaney, are you going to see the president later on? I'm like, yeah, I am. I think why. He goes, you tell him Ronaldo said hello. He's the best boss I ever had. I'm like, what is that? He goes, I was the cameraman on The Apprentice for 10 years. The best boss I've ever had. I've seen him interact with folks of all races.
No, if you have a black friend, it doesn't mean you...
It doesn't. It doesn't. It absolutely, no, it doesn't. But that's not...
When he tells non-white women to go back to where they came from, is that not racist?
Who knows better about whether or not somebody's a racist? You or the person that might have interacted with him for 10 years who is a minority?
Well, all the 4 women who got the racist abuse said he was a racist.
And you don't think politics has anything to do with that?
All right, how about all the black and brown people watching who have been told since they were kids, go back to where you came from playground onwards? It is the most racist insult known to black and brown people.
I can't speak to that. I can speak
you were chief of staff.
I can speak to Donald Trump, not a racist.
Hold on, you've told me earlier you know the job of chief staff. I don't, so I'm asking. Yes. Is the job of chief staff to say something when the boss puts out a racist tweet?
Publicly, no, never.
Privately, did you call him out and say you
I don't talk about what
like
I said to the president privately.
You do.
No chiefs of staff do.
You do.
Very rarely.
It's funny, you can tell us a story about Ronaldo and you went and told the president and you've told us what the president said.
Yeah.
But when it comes to what he said about to you when you apparently may or may not have called him out for racism.
I would not. I did not. Let's be perfectly clear. I did not call him out for racism on this because I don't believe it to be racist.
Why not?
Because I know those. Because I know those people.
Okay. What country is Ayanna Pressley from?
I have no idea.
She's from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Okay.
So what country is she from?
She's American.
So why did you say to tell her to go back to the country from which she came?
Because this is how Donald Trump communicates.
Genuinely, explain to me how telling a black woman born and raised in the United States
by the way,
to go back to the country she came from
until you
is
told
not
me the
racist.
story, I didn't even know she was a black woman. I don't know who she is.
You
I
should
assume
probably work in politics more. You don't know who members of Congress are, senators are. All right. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
I could pick her out of a lineup.
Where is she from?
Is she Puerto Rican?
She's born in New York City.
Okay.
What,
right.
And Puerto Rico is part of?
Puerto Rico is a protected of the United States, and you are citizens.
So which country should AOC go back to?
She's American.
So why did Trump tell her to go back to the country?
I think maybe she should get her hell out of Washington, D.C.
That's not what he said, though. Here, let me read to you. They originally come from countries whose governments are a complete catastrophe.
Look,
what is he talking about?
Betty, if you're trying to convince me that Donald Trump is a racist...
I'm not trying to convince you of anything.
This is where,
I'm asking you on television with an audience
fail.
watching to explain to me in good faith, what did Donald Trump mean when he told...
He's trying to shut them up.
By making racist remarks.
Again, I don't consider them to be racist.
Why?
You don't.
And I'm asking why.
Because I know these people, and I do not believe
That's
that
not
was
how it works,
racially
Mick.
made up. No.
You know someone doesn't
No.
mean a statement's not racist.
Sure, absolutely.
That's not how it works.
No, because
the statement
it does.
is
Because,
racist.
no. Racism is a state of mind. Okay?
No, it's
it
not.
absolutely is.
No, it's not.
Well-
An act, a word, a statement can be racist. This is a racist
I do
statement.
not consider Donald Trump to be racist.
I didn't ask that question. That's a very good politician evasion. I asked you about this statement and you're not able to defend it.
All right.
Let's go to our panel who've been waiting patiently. George Conway, lawyer, former Republican, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. George, in 2019, you wrote in a very famous piece in the Atlantic magazine that you don't need to be a mental health professional to see that something's very seriously off with Trump. You questioned his mental stability and connection with reality. Mick says he's no different to FDR. What is your response?
Well, I never heard of any prior president's chief of staff bringing in a book about mental health written by a bunch of mental health professionals saying that the man is unfit for office. All you have to do is look at the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder. He's clearly a narcissist. Now let's go through the characteristics of antisocial personality disorder. Tell me which one of these that he doesn't meet. Is he a pathological
George,
liar?
so
Is he a liar? Does it matter
why are we
what the
having a
president of the United States is a pathological liar?
Why are we having a psychological conversation about Donald Trump?
Because he's the president of the
you're a
United
lawyer.
States, and you're the one who says that you're trying to tell people how he behaves.
What is it
And
gonna
I'm
change?
telling you how he behaves. You can explain it all because of his mental illnesses. If you go through, the very clear criteria for these very severe personality disorders, a man with no remorse, a man with no conscience, a man who violates rules, laws, and norms, he's a criminal. If you go through all of those elements, it doesn't even matter whether you give a diagnosis. Do you want somebody like that to be president of the United States? And all you do is pretend, oh, well, a lot of people are like that. It's not true. And you know it's not true.
Everybody-
People like you turn into liars because that's what you have to do to stay in good shape.
I'm not going to deal with the ad hominem attacks. I knew that was coming from George. That's fine. Let's say you convince everybody that you're right, including everybody in Washington, D.C. Towards what end? Towards impeaching Donald Trump and removing him from office? Is that what this is really about?
I think
or do you
it's-
just want everybody to agree with you?
We're talking about whether or not he's an authoritarian or a fascist. Those kinds of leaders have particular personality characteristics. And if you go through them, they are exactly the same characteristics that are shown in these serious personality disorders that are defined by psychiatrists and psychologists.
just need a bunch
in
of
other
people
words,
to agree
we know
with you?
exactly, if you want to understand Donald Trump, don't talk to Mick Mulvaney. Read Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, and you will understand Donald perfectly.
Let me bring in another one of our panelists who's here tonight. Greg Swenson is chairman of Republicans Overseas UK. Isn't the problem here that dismissing discussions about Trump's clear weirdness, let's put it politely without any mental health diagnosis, isn't the problem for Republicans that you have no credibility to say, why are we talking about this? You spent the last year talking about Joe Biden's apparent dementia. Isn't that the problem here? By the way, the Democrats, in the end, belatedly did force their candidate to step aside. You guys didn't.
You're going to be critical of your opponents. There's no doubt about that. So I think what we did with Biden was quite obvious, and the press and the Democrat Party did their best to defend him or convince the Americans to overlook it. It didn't work. Yep. Before the June 27th debate, 65% of Americans thought Joe Biden had cognitive issues. Now, with Trump, this is why he won in 2024. From all this banter and all this criticism about his personality, in 2016, in many respects, he won in spite of his personality. People voted for him because of his policies. He was saying things that they were thinking, but they said, oh, I don't like his personality, but I voted for him anyway. In 2024, a lot of people voted for him because of the personality.
Isn't that worrying?
They like the fighter. No, they like the guy. No, they like the guy who punches back.
Does Trump have cognitive issues?
No. And
why not?
No, he does. Well,
Biden does, Trump
it's
doesn't.
It's apples and oranges. What I'm saying is one of the reasons he won in 24 was because of his abrasive, aggressive personality.
Let's bring in Christina Greer, who's Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham. Christina, I mentioned the racism of Donald Trump multiple times tonight. Greg and Mick have said he's not racist, he's not misogynist. The Republicans have stood with Trump, even as he's said and done things that Republicans in the past would have called racist. In fact, I believe Paul Ryan, your old boss in Congress, said textbook racism is how he described Donald Trump's attack on Hispanic judges. We're 10 years into the Trump phenomenon. What is going on here with people just denying what's in front of our eyes?
Well, you have people who have worked for Donald Trump who have said, well, he hasn't said it to me, right? And so, of course, he can't be because he hasn't said anything racist to Mick. We know that part of the reason why the Republicans voted for him in droves is because he said he would take things away from the immigrants, meaning Black people, Latinos, Asians, you name it. They're coming to attack you. They're coming to take away. He said this. He campaigned on it. It's very, well, let me finish. It is very attractive to people and always has been attractive to people because the history of the United States is predicated on anti-Black racism, white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism, which is Donald Trump in a proper nutshell. And he sells this past vision of making America great when it was never great for anyone except for great white men. And that's what he's selling to people. For some, they want to go back to those days, and for others, it's aspirational. This is textbook Donald Trump, and he does it, and he's successful because a lot of people also could not, would not bring themselves to vote for a Black woman as the leader of a free nation. And so they would ignore all of the other things. They'd ignore January 6th. They'd ignore grabbing women by their private parts. They'd ignore all of the facts that we have had.
Why did he do so well with minorities? He did historically well with the Black community, historically well with the Hispanic community. Are all of the Black people who voted for Donald Trump just wrong?
Why did he do so well with particular Black people? Now, keep in mind, Black women are immune to his nonsense. And the vast majority of Black men are as well. He got slightly better with Black men because he's selling this aspirational dream of, as Republicans cut the social safety net and rip all of the money and give it to their friends,
that's not true.
That at one point, then they too can be part of it.
If you're going to play this game where you keep saying, well, he got these votes and he got this support, then you have to look at the other side. His support with Latino communities has crashed since January because he's doing racist things.
But in the election, he did extraordinarily well.
But since then, why has he crashed with Latino communities? Because he's doing racist things.
No, I think they don't like his immigration policies. You might be amongst the group who think people vote against their best interests.
Listen, I vote against my economic interests when I vote for the Democratic Party because I don't want to vote for people who believe in white nationalism. So, yeah, I would rather pay a higher tax rate as a Democrat than have people deported and worry about my students.
It's a sign that they're waiting in a hot Conway Hall patiently to get their questions to Mick Mulvaney. OK, let's go to lady here in the front. We'll stick with the front row.
Ms. Mulvaney, in February of this year, Trump actually posted an AI-generated video that we've all seen that portrayed Gaza as a luxury resort, complete with the Trump Towers, with an image of Netanyahu sunbathing, which was incredibly grotesque. And you responded to this by saying, and I quote, that it wasn't Trump's language and that it sounded more like Jared Kushner rather than Trump. Jared Kushner has called the Israel-Palestine conflict nothing more than a real estate dispute. How can you continue to support Trump, whose vision for Gaza aligns with forced displacement, ethnic cleansing, and American-led redevelopment, literally over Palestinian bodies?
No, the comment was honest, and I still believe it to be the case. It sounded a lot like Jared. Jared brought a perspective on the Abraham Accords that he believed that economic development was going to be a key to sort of bringing stability back to the Middle East. One of the things you have to understand about Donald Trump is that he thinks out loud. I watched that press conference live. He said that, we're going to make it a resort, it's going to be fabulous, et cetera. And I could tell from his body language and his language that this was something he was sort of floating. And sometimes he'll float an idea and see how it goes over. And if I'm remembering this correctly, they walked it back before the end of the night.
No, but he's still, the Trump plan is still on the table of ethnically cleansing Gaza. He went on Fox and said people can't come back, they should go to other countries. That's ethnic cleansing.
I'm not familiar with that one.
You're against that?
Yes, I'm against ethnic cleansing. With Donald Trump, you have to recognize that sometimes an idea gets discussed publicly when it's not a final decision. And it doesn't surprise me they've been walking back that particular sort of perspective on turning it into a resort.
OK, let's go back to the audience.
I'm curious as to your thoughts over the last, say, month or so within the Republican Party, MAGA almost turning on Trump. I think the biggest problem he has is that he's kind of going back on some of the promises he made, especially with regards to war, perhaps amnesty, maybe some extra spending. And how big of a problem do you think that is going forward for the midterms and indeed for 2028 for someone like J.D. Vance?
Yeah, what you've just said is the type of thing that I think could actually change an outcome. This Epstein thing is bizarre. Donald Trump got asked a couple weeks ago, what does it mean to be MAGA? And his answer was essentially whatever I say that it is. And now he's saying there's nothing to see here with Epstein. And that's not gone over thoroughly with the base. And it does raise an interesting question as to whether or not Donald Trump leads MAGA or MAGA pushes Donald Trump. And I'd be curious to see how this shakes out. So watch the internal discussions within the Republican base itself, much more than watching the criticisms from outside, because that's more likely to change an outcome than this is.
Okay. I'm not trying to change an outcome.
No.
I'm just trying to get to
Oh, come on now.
I'm trying to get to the truth.
Yeah.
Let's go to this lady here. Let's stay
George
in
is trying
front,
to
and then we'll go to the back.
Trump has been all over the map with Iran. He began by placing 12 restrictions on Iran demands when he withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018. Then he's been negotiating through Steve Witkoff quite openly. However, brought that to an abrupt end by bombing Iran. How should they read this set of signals? And probably more importantly, how do you see Trump actually reaching a deal with Iran?
I remember sitting there one time talking with the president, with a group of people about our policy towards Taiwan. And the official name of our policy, we actually have a name for it. It's called strategic ambiguity. And Trump leaned back and said, that's fabulous. I love that. That's why you'll see him say one thing one day and the next thing the other day. He wants to keep in his negotiations, keep you guessing as to where he's going to be. But every now and then he said the same thing again and again. And on this particular topic, the one thing he's been consistent on is Iran can't have nuclear weapons. Okay?
But he hasn't been consistent on everything. He said he wouldn't start a new war in the Middle East, and he did.
I understand that. But no, in his mind, he did not. In his mind, he prevented them from having nuclear weapons. Everything else to that is secondary. Maybe you do a trade deal, maybe you don't. If it turns out they still do have some capability, then you can expect him to get engaged again.
Let's go to that lady there in the middle.
The White House says that USAID is dead. Medical sources like the Lancet Journal estimate that this puts 14 million lives at risk all around the world. At the same time, health and support services at home in the U.S. are being gutted. How does the administration justify this, knowing that they're contributing to human suffering while still claiming that their leadership is moral and strategic?
Yeah, I've got a bunch of bets with people as to whether or not American healthcare actually changes much at all because of the one big beautiful bill. Keep in mind, most of what the bill just did that passed slows the rate of growth. We call that a cut in spending in my country. We spent $100 last year on a program, healthcare, rural healthcare, and we spent $103 this year. We call that a cut because we wanted to spend $105. There won't be any noticeable decline in American health because of the bill. But she also, I deal with the second half of her question was healthcare in the United States. I wrote the same budget in 2017. We really don't like USAID. Some of us do believe in soft power, some of us don't. But we believe that it is wasteful.
Sorry, Mick.
A lot of conservative Republicans.
But a lot of Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, George W. Bush,
yes,
big supporters
a lot of the neoconservatives of the party do. They believe more. You
don't like the fact that the U.S. funded 1,000 kitchens in Sudan last year to help people who were starving, and now you're not. You don't like that.
I have no difficulty with doing the good stuff that USAID did.
But you're not now. That's cancelled.
I don't like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That being said, if we have to cut the spending back to zero before we get it right, we're absolutely going to do that.
And kids are dying.
Story.
And kids are dying. Kids can die.
Kids could die. Yeah. Listen.
It's a serious question.
No, it's not a serious question.
So hold on. No.
It really is.
If you are going to no.
No. You don't get to dismiss this. There's already reports out there that people are dying.
If you go to a soup kitchen in Sudan and that is closed because Elon Musk in his jaunt as a government advisor decided to shut it down.
There's already reports that people are dying, and not a single penny has changed. Yes, and not a single penny has changed yet.
That's not true. They pulled people out of countries in Africa.
We do some really good stuff overseas.
What you're saying is not true.
The amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in USAID is stunning. No, it isn't. It's the same. Because Washington doesn't think like that. That's my point. You have to throw the baby out with the bathwater to get it right.
You can get rid of fraud without shutting down kitchens in Sudan.
Then you don't understand how Washington works. You don't.
One of Elon Musk's own Doge engineers came out and said, I was amazed at how little waste there is, less than in Silicon Valley. So we can argue about waste. The point is,
USAID, they're now warning that millions of people might die. And let's say it's wrong. Let's say it's only thousands of people. That's still wrong. As we end tonight, it's very hard to just say, look, stop talking about this stuff. Focus on everything else. Trump himself sets off the fire alarms every other day. You know he went on Meet the Press, and he was asked by Kristen Welker, is it the job of the president to uphold the Constitution? And he said, I don't know.
Yeah. He said it.
That's not worrying to you as a believer?
It was. I thought it was a bad answer to the question, and here's why. I cannot help but watch him and think, what would I say today if I was there? Okay, if we were doing prep, which we always did with the president before he went on TV, we do practice questions. It's just good practice. Now, if you get this question, Mr. President, here's the answer. Yes, it is the job of the President of the United States to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Now, that being said, we have several cases going through the courts to try to establish the extent of executive authority, and I'm going to wait to see what happens with these things. That's the right answer.
But it was a worrying answer.
That's not the answer. That's not the way he gave the answer, and I didn't like it very much.
Let's end on a point of agreement. I didn't like it very much either. Mick Mulvaney, thank you for joining us on Head to Head today. Thank you to our panel of experts, to George, Christina, Greg. Thank you to our audience here in London's Conway Hall.